The Atlantic, March 1943. A U-boat commander, hunched over his instruments in the cramped control room, hears a sound he has never heard before. Distinct splashes, 24 of them, entering the water directly ahead of his vessel. His sonar operator confirms the British escort is still pinging, still tracking, still closing. The commander has 8 seconds to understand what is happening. 8 seconds before 35 pounds of Torpex detonates against his pressure hull. He never gets the chance. This is the story of the Hedgehog, the revolutionary anti-submarine weapon that transformed the Battle of the Atlantic from a desperate struggle into a death trap for German submarines. A weapon so devastatingly effective that it raised kill rates from a meager 5% to an astonishing 25% per attack. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. The year is 1941. Britain stands alone against the Nazi war machine, her lifeline stretching 3,000 miles across the most dangerous ocean in the world. Every day, convoys of merchant ships laden with food, fuel, and weapons crawl across the Atlantic, their survival measured in statistics that grow grimmer by the week. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the German submarine fleet, has unleashed his wolf packs upon this vital artery. His strategy is elegant in its brutality. Dozens of U-boats spread across the convoy routes, waiting in silence. When one spots a convoy, it shadows the ships while radioing coordinates to its brothers. Then, under cover of darkness, the pack attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming the escort vessels through sheer numbers. The mathematics of this underwater war favor the attacker. A Type 7 U-boat displaces just 769 tons on the surface. It measures 67 meters from bow to stern, carries 14 torpedoes, and can dive to depths exceeding 200 meters. In the vast emptiness of the Atlantic, finding this steel needle requires extraordinary luck or extraordinary technology. Britain possesses ASDIC, a device Americans would later call sonar. It sends high-frequency sound waves through the water, listening for the telltale ping of echoes bouncing off submerged objects. When it works, ASDIC can detect a submarine at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. But ASDIC has a fatal flaw, one that German commanders exploit with ruthless efficiency. The acoustic beam projects forward and downward from the escort vessel. As the attacking ship closes on its target, the angle steepens. At approximately 200 meters, something terrible happens. The submarine drops below the beam entirely. It vanishes from detection at precisely the moment the escort needs to attack. This blind spot lasts between 2 and 3 minutes, an eternity in combat. During those minutes, the escort commander must estimate where the submarine will be when his depth charges sink to their preset detonation depth. He must account for the submarine's speed heading and depth changes, all while the submarine commander, fully aware of this limitation, maneuvers desperately to escape. Imagine the scene aboard a British corvette. The ASDIC operator reports contact bearing 045, range 800 meters. The captain orders flank speed, his vessel surging forward through the black Atlantic swells. The crew races to the stern, where the depth charge racks wait with their deadly cylindrical payloads. Each charge contains 300 pounds of amytal explosive. Each weighs over 400 pounds. The detonation depth has been preset, based on the last known position of the enemy. The ASDIC pings grow stronger, faster, 700 meters, 600, 500. The operator's voice grows tense. 400 meters, 300, then silence. The submarine has dropped below the beam. The captain has perhaps 90 seconds of accurate information. After that, he is guessing. The depth charges roll off the stern, splashing into the wake. They sink at approximately 3 meters per second, taking 30 seconds or more to reach their preset depth. During that half-minute, the submarine can travel hundreds of meters in any direction. It can change depth by 50 meters or more. The captain has fired his weapons at a ghost, a memory of where the enemy once was. The explosions boom through the water, massive concussive blasts that shake the escort vessel and rattle teeth in the skulls of her crew. Down below, if the captain has guessed correctly, the U-boat shudders under the onslaught. Lights flicker, gauges crack, men are thrown against bulkheads. But unless that charge detonates within 6 meters of the pressure hull, the submarine survives. Even a near miss at 12 meters typically causes only minor damage. At 40 meters, the U-boat might surface with battle damage, but she remains intact. The mathematics are merciless. To guarantee a kill, you need a depth charge to detonate within arm's reach of a submarine that could be anywhere in a three-dimensional sphere of ocean, maneuvering at unknown depth and heading while you operate completely blind. The odds of success hover around 5%. 19 attacks out of 20 fail entirely. U-boat commanders learn to exploit this fundamental weakness with cold precision. Captain Lieutenant Eric Topp, commanding U-552, endures 197 depth charge attacks during the war. His submarine survives every single one. In April 1945, U-427 weathers 678 depth charges in a single engagement, an 11-hour ordeal that leaves her crew physically and psychologically shattered. But the pressure hull remains intact. The boat surfaces. She escapes. For the men aboard the escort vessels, this becomes a soul-crushing routine. They detect, they attack. They listen for the sounds of a dying submarine, the grinding of metal, the rush of escaping air. Instead, they hear nothing but the endless ping of their Aztec, searching for a target that has slipped away into the black depths. The convoys continue to burn. The U-boats continue to multiply. And Britain edges closer to starvation with every passing month. At HMS Vernon, the Royal Navy's torpedo and mining establishment in Portsmouth, a small team of engineers grapples with this impossible problem. Their leader is Lieutenant Commander Charles Goodeve, a Canadian-born physicist with an unconventional mind and a talent for lateral thinking. Goodeve understands that the depth charge is fundamentally flawed not because it lacks explosive power, but because it requires prediction. An escort commander must guess where his enemy will be in 30 seconds, then hope his guess proves accurate. The submarine commander need only ensure that guess proves wrong. What if, Goodeve reasons, you could attack while you still held contact? What if you could throw your weapons ahead of your vessel into the water where your Aztec beam still illuminates the target? What if you could eliminate the blind spot entirely? The concept is deceptively simple. Instead of dropping charges off the stern, fire them forward while the Aztec maintains contact. Instead of preset depth detonation, use contact fuses that trigger only when they strike something solid. Instead of one or two massive explosions, saturate an area with multiple smaller projectiles, increasing the probability of a direct hit. The engineering challenges prove immense. No weapon in the British arsenal can throw a significant explosive charge forward from a moving vessel with any accuracy. Conventional artillery requires massive recoil-absorbing mechanisms that would tear apart a destroyer's deck. Rockets exist, but their trajectories prove unpredictable in the salt-laden air above the Atlantic. Goodeve turns to an unlikely solution, the spigot mortar. This weapon uses a rod inserted into the barrel of the projectile rather than a conventional barrel containing the projectile. When the propellant charge ignites, it launches the bomb forward without the punishing recoil of conventional artillery. The system proves adaptable to shipboard use. Working with a team of engineers and weapons specialists, Goodeve develops a launcher that mounts 24 spigot mortars in a circular pattern. Each mortar fires a projectile weighing just over 30 pounds, containing a charge of Torpex, an explosive 50% more powerful than TNT by weight. The projectiles launch in a rapid sequence, describing an elliptical pattern approximately 40 meters across at a range of roughly 230 meters ahead of the ship. The genius lies in the fusing mechanism. Unlike depth charges, which detonate at preset depths, regardless of whether anything is nearby, the Hedgehog projectiles carry contact fuses. They explode only when they strike something solid, something like a submarine's pressure hull. This eliminates the plague of false positives that haunt depth charge attacks. When you hear a Hedgehog detonate, you know you've hit something. When you hear nothing, you know you have missed, and you can immediately prepare for another attack. But the weapon's true advantage becomes apparent only when you understand the physics of underwater explosions. A depth charge relies on water-transmitted shock to damage its target. The explosion creates a bubble of superheated gas that expands rapidly, generating a pressure wave that propagates through the water. This wave can damage a submarine at considerable distance, but its force diminishes exponentially with range. The water cushions the blast, dissipating energy in all directions. A contact explosion operates by completely different principles. When a Hedgehog projectile strikes a submarine's pressure hull and detonates, the full force of 35 pounds of Torpex transfers directly into the steel. There is no cushioning effect. There is no dissipation through water. The explosive punches through the metal, opening a hole 3 to 4 inches in diameter. At shallow depths, such a hole presents a serious but manageable emergency. Damage control parties can sometimes stem the flooding. But U-boats operate at depth when under attack, often 200 meters or more beneath the surface. At that depth, the weight of water above creates enormous pressure, roughly 20 atmospheres, 20 times the pressure at the surface. When a Hedgehog projectile opens a hole in the pressure hull at 200 meters depth, seawater does not merely leak inside. It jets through the opening with tremendous force. The flooding rate depends on the size of the breach and the depth. At 250 feet, with 2 or 3 holes punched in the hull, water enters at approximately 400 gallons per minute. The submarine's pumps, designed for minor leaks, cannot hope to match this volume. Within minutes, the boat becomes nose-heavy or stern-heavy as flooding compartments drag her down. Depth control fails. The submarine begins an uncontrolled descent into the crushing depths. If you are finding this story compelling, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss the rest of this incredible history. Now, back to the Atlantic. As the stricken U-boat sinks, external pressure increases relentlessly. The Type 7 submarine is designed to withstand depths up to approximately 200 meters under normal conditions, perhaps 250 meters in emergencies. Beyond 300 meters, the structural limits approach. The steel hull, already weakened by combat damage, begins to groan under forces it was never designed to endure. The men inside hear metal screaming. They feel the bulkheads flex inward. The temperature rises as compressed air generates heat. Gauges crack and shatter. Light bulbs implode. And then, at some depth beyond 350 meters, the hull fails. Not gradually, catastrophically. The implosion happens faster than human perception can register. One moment, 50 men occupy a pressurized steel cylinder. The next moment, the cylinder ceases to exist in any recognizable form. The remaining air compresses into superheated plasma. The shock wave registers on sonar equipment miles away. No one survives. There are no wounded to rescue, no prisoners to take. The ocean claims everything. The first Hedgehog systems enter service in early 1942. Initial results prove disappointing, not because the weapon fails to work, but because escort crews struggle with the new tactics required. They have spent years training with depth charges, learning patterns and timing and instincts that do not apply to forward-throwing weapons. The transition demands new doctrine, new reflexes, new ways of thinking about submarine warfare. But as training improves and experience accumulates, the statistics begin to shift. Attacks that previously succeeded 5% of the time now succeed 25% of the time. 1 in 4 engagements produces a confirmed kill, 5 times the previous rate. More critically, the Hedgehog enables attacks that were previously impossible. An escort can engage a submarine immediately upon detection, without waiting for the elaborate approach required for depth charge attacks. A single vessel can make multiple attacks in rapid succession, adjusting aim based on results. The psychological dimension proves equally devastating. U-boat commanders have spent years learning to exploit the blind spot, to twist and dive and evade during those precious minutes when their hunter cannot see them. Hedgehog renders this expertise worthless. The attacks come while ASDIC still holds contact. The escort commander can see exactly where his enemy lurks. He can adjust his attack in real time. The submarine commander finds his most reliable survival tactics suddenly, terrifyingly ineffective. Imagine the scene aboard a Type 7 submarine in early 1943. The hydrophone operator reports propeller sounds approaching, the distinctive beat of a British corvette at attack speed. The captain orders silent running, cuts all unnecessary equipment, holds the boat steady at periscope depth until the last moment before diving deep. He has done this dozens of times. He knows the drill. The corvette approaches. The captain times the dive perfectly, slipping below the ASDIC beam as the enemy closes to 200 meters. He orders hard right rudder, commanding the boat to curve away from its predicted course. For 30 seconds, perhaps 40, he waits for the boom of depth charges. Instead, he hears splashes, many splashes, directly ahead. His mind struggles to process. There should be no weapons ahead. The enemy should be astern, dropping charges into his wake. What is happening? 8 seconds later, the first detonation tears a hole through his forward torpedo room. Water roars through the breach. Alarm bells scream. Men rush forward with damage control equipment, but the flooding overwhelms them immediately. The bow drops, the angle steepens, and the captain realizes with horrible clarity that everything he knows about surviving depth charge attacks no longer applies. The year 1943 marks the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic, and Hedgehog plays a critical role in this transformation. In February, the British 2nd Escort Group, a flotilla of 6 sloops centered on HMS Starling, under the legendary Captain Frederick John Walker, demonstrates the weapon's potential with breathtaking effectiveness. In just 19 days, Walker's group sinks 6 German U-boats using a combination of Hedgehog attacks and improved tactical coordination. Walker himself becomes a master of the new doctrine. He develops techniques for coordinating multiple escorts in Hedgehog attacks, boxing in submarines with converging lines of fire. He studies every engagement, refines every tactic, pushes his crews to exploit every advantage the new weapon provides. His motto is simple and brutal. Take the offensive, attack relentlessly. Give the enemy no rest, no respite, no chance to recover. The results speak in steel and blood. U-boat losses mount through the spring of 1943. German crews, once confident in their ability to evade and survive, begin to understand that the rules have changed. Boats that once returned from patrols with minor damage now fail to return at all. The hydrophone operators listen for approaching escorts with new dread, knowing that detection no longer means discomfort and fear, but increasingly means death. May 1943 earns a special name in German naval history. They call it Black May. In that single month, Allied forces sink 41 U-boats. The loss rate becomes unsustainable. Experienced crews, irreplaceable veterans who have survived dozens of patrols, perish in the black depths. Training programs cannot replace them quickly enough. Admiral Dönitz faces an impossible calculation. Continuing the offensive means losing his entire fleet within months. On May 24, 1943, Dönitz takes the only rational action available. He orders his submarines to withdraw from the North Atlantic convoy routes. The wolf packs that have terrorized Allied shipping for nearly 4 years retreat to bases in France and Norway, defeated not by a single decisive battle, but by accumulated attrition, by technology that stripped away their advantages one by one. But the story of hedgehog's effectiveness finds its most spectacular demonstration not in the Atlantic, but in the Pacific, and not in 1943, but in May 1944. There, in the waters east of the Philippines, a single destroyer escort accomplishes something that has never been done before or since in naval history. USS England is a Buckley-class destroyer escort, one of hundreds of similar vessels mass-produced in American shipyards to combat the submarine threat. Her commanding officer is Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton, and her crew numbers just over 200 men. She carries standard armament for her class, 3-inch guns, torpedo tubes, depth charge racks, and a single Hedgehog launcher mounted forward. In early May 1944, American intelligence decrypts Japanese radio traffic indicating the presence of a submarine picket line east of the Philippines. Admiral Toyota has positioned several submarines to provide early warning of American fleet movements. Finding and destroying these submarines becomes an urgent priority. England joins a hunter-killer group assigned to sweep the picket line. On May 19th, the group detects a submarine contact. England closes to attack, her ASDIC operator maintaining solid contact throughout the approach. The Hedgehog launcher fires its salvo of 24 projectiles. They arc through the air and splash into the water ahead. Silence. Then 3 detonations. 3 projectiles striking the submerged hull of I-16. The submarine never surfaces. Debris and oil mark her grave. 1 day later, England's ASDIC operator reports another contact. Again the Hedgehog fires. Again, multiple projectiles find their mark. RO-106 joins her sister at the bottom of the Pacific. The pattern continues with almost mechanical precision. May 22nd brings another contact, another attack, another kill. RO-104 becomes England's 3rd victim. On May 23rd, RO-116 meets the same fate. And on May 26th, RO-108 completes the destruction of Admiral Toyota's entire submarine picket line. 5 submarines, 12 days. A single destroyer escort with 183 men aboard. No warship in any navy has ever matched this record of submarine destruction in such a compressed time frame. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet, sends a message that enters naval legend. He signals simply that there will always be an England in the United States Navy. The secret to England's extraordinary success lies partly in the skill of her crew and partly in the weapon they wielded. Hedgehog transformed the mathematics of submarine hunting. Instead of rolling depth charges off the stern and hoping, Pendleton's crew could attack with precision while maintaining contact, adjust based on results, and deliver killing blows with devastating reliability. When those 3 projectiles punched holes in I-16's pressure hull, seawater did not merely enter. At the depth where the submarine cruised, probably 250 feet or more, 25 atmospheres of pressure drove water through those openings at catastrophic velocity. The buoyancy tanks flooded immediately. Depth control became impossible. The submarine began her final descent into the crushing deep. The physics of pressure hull failure operates on exponential scales. As a submarine sinks beyond her design depth, external pressure increases by roughly 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of descent. At 300 meters, the steel skin experiences forces exceeding 30 atmospheres. At 400 meters, the pressure approaches 40 atmospheres. Somewhere between these depths, depending on the submarine's construction and existing damage, the structure fails. The implosion is not merely destructive, it is annihilating. The remaining air inside the hull, compressed into a volume far smaller than its original, reaches temperatures measured in hundreds of degrees. The shock wave propagates outward through the water at nearly 1,500 meters per second. Sonar operators miles away hear a distinctive crack, the sound of a submarine dying. The development and deployment of Hedgehog illustrates a broader truth about the Battle of the Atlantic. The war beneath the waves was not won by any single weapon or technology. It was won by the relentless accumulation of advantages, each improvement building upon the last, each innovation stripping away another layer of the U-boat's protective advantages. ASDIC found the submarines. Improved depth charges forced them deeper. Shipborne high-frequency direction finders located their radio transmissions. Centimetric radar detected them on the surface at night, when they rose to recharge batteries. The lead light, a powerful searchlight mounted on patrol aircraft, illuminated them in the final moments of approach, blinding crews and fixing targets for attack. And Hedgehog, deployed at the moment of engagement, delivered killing blows with unprecedented efficiency. The Germans attempted countermeasures. They equipped their submarines with METOX receivers designed to detect Allied radar and provide warning of approaching aircraft. For a time, this device worked. U-boat commanders could dive before aircraft reached attack position, but then the Allies deployed centimetric radar, operating at wavelengths the METOX could not detect. Suddenly, submarines were being attacked at night by aircraft they never heard approaching. The METOX receivers sat silent while patrol bombers closed to attack range, their pilots watching the surfaced U-boat through radar displays. The psychological toll mounted alongside the physical losses. U-boat service had always been dangerous, but the crews had taken pride in their skill, their technology, their ability to strike and survive. Now they found themselves hunted by enemies who seemed to possess supernatural powers, who could find them in total darkness, who could attack while maintaining constant contact, who had stripped away every advantage submarine warfare once provided. Morale collapsed. Crews grew superstitious. Wild theories spread through the fleet about how the Allies were locating submarines. Some believed spies had infiltrated the construction yards. Others suspected the British had developed detection methods based on diesel exhaust or body heat, or somehow reading the magnetic disturbances of steel hulls moving through the water. The truth, that a combination of technological advances had simply rendered existing tactics obsolete, proved harder to accept. Admiral Dönitz recognized the crisis, but struggled to respond. German scientists worked frantically on countermeasures, attempting to develop radar detectors capable of sensing the new centimetric wavelengths. They designed snorkels that allowed submarines to run diesel engines at periscope depth, reducing the need for surface running. They proposed new submarine types with improved underwater performance, capable of outrunning escorts while submerged. But the war's industrial equation worked against Germany. Each new countermeasure required design, testing, production, and deployment cycles measured in months or years. Meanwhile, Allied shipyards produced escort vessels by the hundreds. American factories churned out Hedgehog launchers, radar sets, and depth charges in quantities that dwarfed German production capacity. For every U-boat that entered service, the Allies commissioned 3 or 4 escort vessels specifically designed to destroy it. By late 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had effectively been decided. U-boats continued to operate, continued to sink merchant ships, continued to take Allied lives. But the strategic outcome was no longer in doubt. The convoys were getting through. Britain would not starve. The buildup of men and material for the invasion of Europe proceeded on schedule. The men who fought this battle deserve recognition that history has often failed to provide. Aboard the corvettes and frigates and destroyer escorts, crews endured conditions that rivaled the hardships of the submarines they hunted. The North Atlantic in winter produces some of the most savage weather on Earth. Waves reaching 40 feet crash across exposed decks. Wind chills plunge temperatures far below freezing. Ice accumulates on every surface, threatening to capsize top-heavy vessels. In these conditions, men stood watch for hours, scanning the horizon, monitoring as Dick, maintaining the eternal vigilance that convoy protection demanded. They slept in rotating shifts, never knowing when the alarm would sound, when another submarine contact would send them racing to battle stations. They ate cold meals from cans, unable to heat food in seas that threw the ship like a toy. They watched friends die, sometimes in the fire and thunder of torpedo strikes, sometimes in the cold embrace of waters that killed within minutes. And they did this not for days or weeks, but for months, stretching into years. The Battle of the Atlantic was the longest continuous military campaign of the Second World War, beginning on the first day and ending only with Germany's surrender. Millions of tons of shipping crossed those waters. Thousands of merchant seamen and naval personnel gave their lives. The margin between victory and defeat often seemed measured in individual ships, individual convoys, individual depth charge attacks. The Hedgehog weapon contributed to this victory in ways that transcended simple statistics. Yes, it raised kill rates from 5% to 25%. Yes, it enabled the destruction of submarines that would otherwise have escaped. But its impact extended beyond the mathematics of attrition. Hedgehog gave escort commanders confidence. It gave them a weapon that rewarded skill and allowed aggressive tactics. It shifted the psychological balance from defense to offense, from endurance to attack. When Captain Walker took his escort group hunting through the North Atlantic, he did so with the knowledge that his weapons could actually destroy the enemy he found. When Lieutenant Commander Pendleton guided USS England through her legendary patrol, he wielded a weapon that turned contacts into kills with mechanical reliability. The submarine crews felt this shift keenly. They had endured depth charge attacks for years, learning to survive through skill and luck, and the fundamental inadequacy of their enemy's weapons. Hedgehog changed the calculus. A single, well-executed attack could end a boat that had survived dozens of depth charge assaults. The experienced crews, the veterans who had weathered hundreds of detonations, found their expertise suddenly worthless against a weapon that attacked from ahead while maintaining constant contact. Take a moment to subscribe and share this video with anyone who appreciates the untold stories of the Second World War. Now let us continue. The development of Hedgehog also illustrates the importance of institutional culture in military innovation. The Royal Navy, despite its traditions and sometimes rigid hierarchy, created spaces where unconventional thinkers like Commander Goodeve could experiment with radical ideas. HMS Vernon became an incubator for weapons that challenged existing doctrine, that demanded new tactics, that pushed beyond the comfortable limits of established practice. This willingness to innovate extended throughout the Allied command structure. When ASDIC proved insufficient, engineers developed improved versions. When depth charges proved inadequate, designers created ahead-throwing weapons. When surface radar left submarines invisible at night, scientists invented centimetric wavelengths. Each challenge produced a response. Each German countermeasure triggered an Allied countermeasure. The technical war proceeded in parallel with the shooting war, often determining outcomes long before ships met submarines in combat. The German response to Hedgehog proved inadequate, largely because the weapon attacked at a fundamental level. The acoustic torpedo could be countered with decoys and noisemakers. Radar could be detected and avoided. But a weapon that simply threw explosives into the water ahead of an escort, while that escort maintained sonar contact, offered few obvious countermeasures. A submarine could only dive deeper and maneuver more violently, but the Hedgehog pattern spread across 40 meters. The probability of every projectile missing a submarine-sized target within that area proved uncomfortably low. German submarines did develop new tactics in response to the changing threat environment. They traveled in loose groups to provide mutual warning. They adopted radical evasive maneuvers upon detecting escorts. They operated at depths that pushed their hulls to design limits, hoping that the reduced detection range would offset the risks of pressure damage. None of these adaptations proved sufficient. The Type 21 submarine, Germany's revolutionary attempt to regain the initiative, arrived too late to affect the war's outcome. This vessel featured dramatically improved underwater speed and range, capable of outrunning escorts while submerged and remaining underwater for extended periods. Had it entered service in numbers during 1943, it might have changed the mathematics again. Instead, the first operational Type 21s deployed in early 1945, when Germany's defeat was already certain. The legacy of Hedgehog extends far beyond the Second World War. The fundamental concept, an ahead-throwing weapon with contact fuses that attacks while sonar maintains contact, influenced anti-submarine warfare doctrine for decades. The British developed Squid, an improved three-barreled depth-charge mortar that could place charges with even greater precision. The Americans created ASROC, a rocket-propelled system that could deliver nuclear or conventional charges to targets miles away. Modern navies continue to employ weapons descended from Goodeve's original design. The human cost of the Battle of the Atlantic reached staggering proportions. Approximately 30,000 German U-boat crewmen lost their lives, roughly 70% of those who served. Allied merchant marine losses exceeded 30,000 dead. Thousands more perished aboard escort vessels, patrol aircraft, and convoy ships. The North Atlantic became a graveyard stretching from the coasts of North America to the ports of Britain, marked not by headstones, but by rust and silence. For the U-boat crews, service became increasingly synonymous with death. In the early years, a submarine patrol carried risk, but also reasonable hope of survival. By 1944, boarding a U-boat meant accepting odds that would terrify a gambler. The statistical likelihood of surviving the war approached 30%. 2 out of 3 men who donned the submarine badge would not live to see peace. The men knew these statistics. They sailed anyway. Some were volunteers, drawn by patriotism or adventure or the camaraderie of the submarine service. Others received orders and followed them as military discipline demanded. All of them descended into steel cylinders that might become their tombs, that might carry them to the crushing depths where Hedgehog projectiles had opened their hulls to the sea. There is something almost medieval in the character of submarine warfare, despite its technological sophistication. The vulnerability of the individual human body against the vast indifference of the ocean, the claustrophobic confinement of the submarine hull, the knowledge that death, when it came, would come either in fire and violence or in the slow suffocation of a flooded compartment. The men who fought this war on both sides demonstrated courage that deserves remembrance regardless of the causes they served. The Hedgehog itself became an unlikely symbol of this transformation. A weapon of 24 small bombs, fired in a pattern that looked almost festive from a distance, trailing arcs of white foam as they splashed into the water. Nothing about its appearance suggested the lethality it represented. Nothing about its compact launcher hinted at the thousands of lives it would claim. But within months of its introduction, U-boat commanders learned to fear those distinctive splashes ahead of their vessels. They learned that the old tactics no longer worked, that diving deep and maneuvering wildly no longer guaranteed survival. They learned that the mathematics had shifted against them, that each attack now carried odds of death that no amount of skill could overcome. The Battle of the Atlantic stands as one of the decisive campaigns of modern history. Had Germany succeeded in strangling Britain's supply lines, the war would have taken a dramatically different course. There would have been no buildup of American forces in Britain, no D-Day, no liberation of Western Europe through the path that history actually followed. The Soviet Union might still have prevailed in the East, but at costs even more terrible than those actually paid. The shape of the post-war world would have been utterly transformed. Instead, the convoys got through. The island fortress held. The weapons and supplies and men accumulated until the Allies possessed overwhelming force. And among the tools that made this possible, The Hedgehog occupies a special place, a weapon designed by engineers who understood the problem at its fundamental level and solved it through elegant physics. Commander Goodeve and his team at HMS Vernon never achieved the fame of fighter pilots or tank commanders. Anti-submarine warfare lacks the visual drama of aerial combat or armored advances. The battles occur beneath the surface, invisible to cameras, recorded only in terse action reports and statistical summaries. But the contribution of these weapons developers proved no less decisive than any victory on land or in the air. The next time you encounter a reference to the Battle of the Atlantic, remember the Hedgehog. Remember the 24 projectiles arcing through the air, splashing into the water 200 meters ahead of a corvette. Remember the contact fuses waiting for the touch of steel. Remember the 3-inch holes punched through pressure hulls, the catastrophic flooding at 20 atmospheres, the submarines that never surfaced. Remember also the men on both sides who fought this war beneath the waves, the escort crews who stood watch through North Atlantic storms, the U-boat crews who descended into steel coffins, the engineers and scientists who labored to provide advantages that might tip the balance, the admirals who planned campaigns and counted losses and made the calculations that sent men to die. This is the story of how technology transformed warfare, how a single innovation could shift the odds across an entire ocean. It is the story of human ingenuity applied to the ancient problem of destroying enemies. And it is a reminder that wars are often decided not in single dramatic battles, but in the accumulated weight of countless small advantages, each one barely significant alone, together overwhelming. The secret shell that made U-boats helpless in the Atlantic night was not secret for long. But by the time German intelligence understood what they faced, the damage was done. The wolf packs had lost their fangs. The hunters had become the hunted. And across 3,000 miles of ocean, the convoys continued their slow, vital crawl toward Britain, carrying the supplies that would ultimately crush the Nazi war machine. Thank you for watching this deep dive into one of the Second World War's most important yet overlooked technologies. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you do not miss future content exploring the hidden history of military innovation. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the Battle of the Atlantic and the weapons that decided its outcome. Until next time, remember that history is not merely the story of great leaders and dramatic battles, but also the story of engineers and scientists and ordinary sailors who changed the world through courage and ingenuity.